My tips for learning a foreign language. You don't study a language, you live a language. Learning a language is a lifetime commitment. You never stop studying. You should be prepared to study the language for the rest of your life. Think about your own native language. You probably use your native language every single day of your life. A foreign language needs to be treated the same way. You have to use it every single day of your life. It takes less than 3 years to achieve a reasonable level of fluency. Study every single day for at least 15 minutes. Ideally, you should study at least 1 hour per day. But if that's not possible, dedicate at least 15 minutes every day. Vocabulary is the most important thing in learning a foreign language. Compared to vocabulary, grammar is relatively easy. The really difficult thing about learning a foreign language is acquiring vocabulary. You need to memorize a large number of words. It's not easy, it takes time. More than 99% of your effort will go into acquiring vocabulary. You can get grammar by reading just a few textbooks, but vocabulary will be much more difficult. One very easy and fun way to start studying is translating song lyrics. You can easily find songs on your target language on YouTube and then search the lyrics on the internet. Then you can use sites like Google Translate and online dictionaries to translate. By listening to the song, you can learn correct pronunciation. You have to translate native material as early as possible. By native material, I mean material that native speakers consume, like books, newspapers, magazines, films, music, etc. There are easy materials that beginners can use. Song lyrics are usually very simple and easy to understand and translate. You can also use books for children. Textbooks are not enough. Textbooks only give you the very basics of grammar and vocabulary. No matter how thick your textbook may be, you will never become fluent by simply reading a few textbooks. Textbooks are not that important. Unfortunately, many students tend to overestimate textbooks. You have to advance as quickly as possible to native reading materials like books, magazines that native speakers actually read normally. A lot of people make the fatal mistake of spending too much time on textbooks. You could read and memorize all the textbooks in the world and still would not be able to speak fluently. In my experience, you should read at least 10 native books before achieving some kind of fluency. The very first book I read in English was William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist when I was in high school. I couldn't understand half of the words, but the book was so enthralling I couldn't stop reading. I do not recommend learning several languages at the same time. I think it's much better to focus on a single language at a time. Focus on a single language for at least 2 or 3 years, then maybe add a new language. I don't understand why some people want to learn several languages at the same time. Why would you want to do that? There is a very real danger of wasting years of your life and failing to learn anything. Do you really want to take that risk? I am against writing down on paper. It takes too much time to write things down on paper. It is much better to use the computer. If you have a computer, write everything on a computer. I strongly recommend to learn blind typing on a keyboard. Blind typing is the ability to type the keyboard with all your fingers without having to look at the keyboard. Blind typing is not that difficult. It's much faster than writing on paper, and you will never want to return to paper again. The only exception is when you have to learn things like Japanese kanji. The only way to memorize kanji is by writing them down on paper. There is no other way. How do you learn a foreign language? One word at a time. There is no other way. The dictionary is your best friend. Be hungry for words and consult the dictionary frequently. You should learn at least 5 new words every day. Interact with people. Look for native speakers or other students like yourself and teach, learn, help one another. Use social media. Use YouTube. Find other people who are also studying the same language. Find people who are teaching the language and ask as many questions as possible. Also, the best way to learn is to teach. Teach what you know. There are always people who know less than you and are interested in learning. As soon as you reach an advanced or even an intermediate level, you should start using a native monolingual dictionary as opposed to a bilingual dictionary for foreigners. A native monolingual dictionary is the one used by native speakers. That is because the bilingual dictionary only gives you an approximate translation instead of the precise meaning of the word. For the precise meaning, you have to read the monolingual native dictionary. Spoken language and written language can be very different. Many students want to learn a foreign language so they can talk to native speakers. They assume that spoken language is easier, but many times that is not true. Spoken language can be very different from what it is taught at textbooks. Spoken language includes different dialects, different accents, abbreviations, slang, body language, gestures, interjections, pop culture references. All those things can be incredibly difficult and not taught by any textbooks or even any book at all. A very common complaint by students is that native speakers don't talk in the same way as textbooks. The fault is not in the textbook. The whole problem is that spoken language can be actually much more complex and difficult than written language. Most native speakers will switch to an easier, more textbook-like way when talking to foreigners. But when native speakers talk among themselves, it may sound like a completely different language, and unfortunately, there may be no books to help you with that. I read any book at least twice. The first reading is done as quickly as possible without consulting the dictionary and ignoring any part that I don't understand. The second reading is much slower because I consult the dictionary for every unknown word, but I skip the boring parts and only reread the interesting chapters. I hate memorization. To this day, I haven't memorized my address or my cell phone number. I have terrible memory. And yet I speak Portuguese, English, Japanese, and I'm learning Swedish right now. I am against memorizing words. I focus on understanding the text I'm reading. It is possible to understand a text even if you don't know some of the words in the text. There is no need to know every single word in a text to understand it. I have found so many people advocating memorization tools, apps, or software. It really baffles me. Do you really need those? You only need to worry about important words. You can ignore words that are rarely used. Important words, on the other hand, are used frequently, so it means you are going to meet those words again and again, and you will memorize them automatically, without any effort. I am reading a book on mathematics right now, and it uses the word teidi on almost every single page. Why do I need to memorize the word teidi if the book I'm reading uses that word on every single page? There is no need to memorize the word. Just by reading the book, the word gets stuck in my head. The same applies for every single word that you need. Important words are used frequently. If you read a lot, you will inevitably meet those words again and again, and you will memorize them whether you want it or not. There is no need to use a special tool to memorize those words. Some people seem to be convinced they need to memorize a bunch of words before reading native material. They seem to believe that those words will magically allow them to read native material. But in my opinion, they should be doing the exact opposite. You should be reading native material to acquire vocabulary, not the other way around. Memorizing a bunch of unrelated words seems to be completely painful, boring, inefficient, tedious, and time-consuming. Why would anyone want to do that? That's why, in my opinion, memorization tools are really a waste of time. One last note, my memory is horrible, so I write down everything on a small notebook I carry all the time in my pocket. I already know I will forget things, so I don't even try to memorize. I just write them down.